you would.
Yes, I'm an understudy, so that means I'm doing my normal ensemble work. And if Johnny Gallagher, who plays the mate, should be out for whatever reason, I might have to jump in.
Thank you. Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob Keith Watson. I'm in the ensemble, and I also understudy the captain.
Torian.
Hello, I'm Torian Everett. The dance captain's responsibility is to make sure the team has departed.
Great. Okay, Torian, your internet connection is a little dodgy, so I'm going to come back to you in a second and have you talk a bit more about the dance captain thing because it's cool. Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian Blake Ensko, and I play little brother, pure and simple.
Amazing. Yeah, everybody, I know the sound seems a little dodgy. What can I tell you? Everybody in Berkeley must be on the interweb right this second, so bear with us. That a little better? We'll see. We'll do the best we can. So you guys, I think for some of you, Swept Away was the first show you did since the pandemic. Is that true for everybody? First theater piece?
Yeah, I think we
Dang it.
we were all prepared to come to Berkeley, and we all know how that ended. But it's amazing, and it speaks to the amount of passion I think that's between the cast and the team and the people at Berkeley Rep, the wonderful folks. The project is still happening after 2 years now. My audition was in 2019.
That's a lot of numbers ago. What did it feel like after years of being separated from your craft, from your practice, from your income stream, you know, all of those things to come back into both a rehearsal room and then a theater?
I felt like it was actually an opportunity to remind ourselves of what grace feels like. I think oftentimes in the industry, we're going, and pushing harder, better, stronger, faster. And in this case, going back into a theater space, we kind of wanted to pick up where we left off, but we were just out of practice. And it takes practice, you know, to get to where we want to be and where some of us are, or all of us are. And I think there was an opportunity for grace and just to say, oh yeah, it's okay to make these mistakes. So we haven't done this in a long time. It's okay to, you know, to feel like we're failing, or to not know what we're doing or how this works again, or to not have the stamina, and to carry that in further things past this, that the grace of it all is okay.
And I know
yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
I know I spent a lot of time during all of our time away from being in the theater thinking, is this really what am I going to continue doing this if this ever comes back? And so I think for me, there was a period of time, probably for about a year, where I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to go be a carpenter. I'm just going to go do that because I enjoy doing it. It pays my bills. Let's do it. And then probably the last half leading into knowing some jobs were coming, my spirit started to awaken again. Yes, once I was a carpenter. But so I think that part of me started to awaken again. I think once we got back into a rehearsal space, I think it, like you said, it was a chance to be reminded what grace feels like. It's also a chance to kind of rewrite the way we do things in our minds, and take what we enjoyed and what we missed and leave behind the things that stressed us out and the things that did not serve us in the rehearsal space or in the performance space, and just kind of leave all that behind and reset the way we do things.
For me, the fact that this was the piece, the first thing that I was able to do after the COVID experience and the pandemics and the shutdowns and the quarantines, was quite convenient emotionally, because I didn't have to reach very far for those ideas of missing home, missing family, facing death. All of those things were very relevant, and not just to me, but to the audiences that we've been lucky to be in front of as well.
I actually got to do a couple of virtual gigs where I did two shows with this company where they sent us, props and costumes, and it was everything you could possibly do virtually and the best production value possible. But the thing, and it was great. I learned some new skills, but the thing that was missing was like eye contact, communion, really getting together and feeling a vibe of what a story is together. And I think that's what theater does that no other medium does. And I think it's what makes it really special and getting to share that live with the audience. So it's really nice to come back and see the audience is really engaging with the piece. And it's different every night. Sometimes people are quiet, sometimes they're not. But I think that relationship we haven't had in 2 years. So that's been wonderful.
I just want to say to all the nice people out there, if you have questions for this team, pop them into that Q&A tab that's at the bottom of your screen. And if you use that, they'll get funneled directly to us. Thank you so much. And we'll see them more easily than we can in the chat. Feel free to say hi in the chat. We'll be psyched about that too. But if you have questions for this fantastic team, the Q&A is the place to put them. This is a slightly related question. And I found in the times that I got to visit your rehearsal room, which was a lot because it's one of the real privileges of this job, I found that even in the midst of a really challenging, emotional, sort of dark piece, your rehearsal room was incredibly joyful. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the choices that you have to make as an actor of where in a piece that has so much darkness in it and such emotional challenge, where do you sort of steer into that, and where do you make a different choice in terms of your own process and how to keep yourself swimming for the light, if you will?
I would just start by saying a big part of that is it comes from the top down, from you, Joanna, but also from Michael Mayer and the whole team. Michael brings a real light and a real uplift and lots of laughs and very funny. He's a funny guy. He cracks jokes. It's a very, to have him leading the charge with his very specific but light touch, certainly in the first few weeks, was huge for that because it allowed us to all maintain that level of communication outside of the doing of the thing. So for me, that was where it started.
Yeah, I feel like I would always, sorry, just one quick thing. I feel like I would always come back into rehearsal rooms and people would be laughing and like playing show tunes. And like there'd be some like video that everybody was watching and like having a great time gathering on. And I also will say that like working with this material, of course, John Logan's book is very weighty and deals with huge questions of morality, but having the Avett songs to guide us through this, I think they always find a light even in really challenging subject material. And so for me that was one of the guiding forces for coming back into this in such challenging times. It was very apropos to be coming back with the Avett's music.
Here's a question from our audience. What Avett song that isn't in the show would you have loved to see or to get to perform? Anybody?
I was talking with John Gallagher about this a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned the song "Boatloads of Shame," which is just a great song, and also I could see it making its way into the show at some point.
I think there's no reason as to why this song would be in the show in any way, shape, or form. But I and Lovin' You is a great one, a classic, a true classic. So many, but yeah.
I got recently really into High Steppin', which is another one that's sort of like just outside of their normal like lane, and loved it. My kids love that song.
I actually didn't know the Avett Brothers before coming onto this project. So one of the cool things for me as an actor is, this is in the jukebox musical form. I guess, in many ways. But for me, I didn't see it as that because I didn't know the music previously. And I think John Logan did a really good job of weaving a story from the lyrics in the canon that he chose for this show. So I think for me, I can't think of songs that would be in this because it's so specific. We've created something very specific, in my opinion.
Um, Somebody asked a question about the moment, Torian, this one's for you. The moment of your leaning off of the handrail in the shipwreck. And I just wonder if you could both describe that for the people who don't necessarily know that moment, but maybe talk people a little bit through what David Newman's process was in creating the sense of a shipwreck using only sound, light, and your bodies. I mean, and then there were hydraulics too. Let's not forget that. But
Of course, it actually sort of connects to the last question that we had about like our processes and going through, being off stage and on stage. I think one of the big things is that everyone had the opportunity to have their own agency. It was a collaborative, creative process rather than us being placeholders for one person's particular idea. We all feel like we had a say. And the question I came up with the lean from the handrail because we were on the stage and we were just trying to explore different ways in which it would look like we were falling. So if you haven't seen the show, I mean, you will see there's a moment where we are simulating a shipwreck and we move in slow motion, and the choreographer's vision was that without having the technical element of a ship that's actually rocking, we want to create the illusion with our bodies. And so we're recreating this illusion of being on, in waves on the ship. And the process it's truly trial and error. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? What does this look like from the outside? What does it look like, in context with what everyone else is doing? And so in those moments, we find that we really are just playing and exploring, which I think the beautiful thing about this process is that there was room to do that. And if we didn't like something, then we didn't like it. And if we love something, then we saved it. And in that particular moment, I think just it looks maybe more difficult than it actually is. It's cantilever. So I won't say anything else then.
I tried to do that and I couldn't do it.
It's fun. It's a fun moment. And you'll see just the different levels of each character on the ship, and it actually is a pretty fantastic illusion.
I find also watching Cameron tip off the deck, and also there's a moment that Stark and Adrian are singing while they're essentially like in a crunch position, and it just feels like an ab workout watching you.
Yeah, that's our Pilates for the day.
I appreciate it. Hey, actually, Stark and Adrian, this is a question for you both. These two brothers, each separately, spoiler alert, everybody, but not really, make a decision to sacrifice themselves. And I just wonder, could you talk a little bit about sort of what it is from inside that character to come to those decisions? That's a big one. I'm watching you both unmute simultaneously.
Adrian, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks.
You make the decision first.
I do make the decision first. I would say little brother is struggling with finding meaning and finding a way to stand out from his peers, from the religious rigor that he's been raised under, and so he's dealing with the consequences of that of the adventure that he's struck out on. A big change in his life that he's kind of by default dragged his brother along for the ride, and so I don't know. I think there's a certain amount of adventurism in little brother wanting to sacrifice. It's almost like a romantic ideal that he feels like he has to take because to atone for bringing everybody down in this awful situation that he's brought his brother into.
That's beautiful, and I see that on your face every night. Big Brother's main mission in this piece is to protect his brother. It's very clearly stated many times, and to bring him home. So what I imagine is that when little brother ran away from home and Big Brother went after him, the last thing he said to his mom and dad was, "Don't worry, I'm going to get him back." And so when we end up on this lifeboat, and it looks very much like we're not going to make it home, and we come to that acceptance. The last decision that Big Brother makes is to sacrifice himself so that his little brother can have one last chance. And part of that is that he worries that little brother is not saved, and may not be heading up to heaven when this life ends, where he is right now on his path. But there's a confidence that the Big Brother will be. And so if he perishes on this boat and it allows little brother to survive a little bit longer, then he's done everything he possibly can to keep him alive. The act of doing it is the most challenging emotional journey I've ever had to do on any job. But it somehow is there, and I'm grateful for what happens after that, which is a moment of hope and acceptance collectively by the remaining members of the boat, that we get this sort of uplift as the show closes, because it would be a much, much harder job without that.
Thank you. And we debated the ending of the show. I mean, there was a night that we did a different ending. Somebody asked, what was different after the first preview? How many things changed? Does anybody want to comment on what that preview process was like?
Truly, it's almost hard to remember specifically because that whole preview process, there were tiny adjustments happening throughout, as with a lot of new works. When you get into previews and you see what it's like for an audience to interact and how things are reading, you try to nudge things a little bit. The biggest thing was, like you said, the ending. We just weren't sure exactly how to hammer home the message of redemption and enlightenment on the part of the mate. At certain points we had, I think initially in the script, it was just little brother going over to the mate and singing, and it was just this moment between little brother and the mate. But we kind of felt like it needed to have a little bit more universal acceptance. And so we tried out a lot of different things. At one point, the entire crew was standing around the mate. In the end, I think we kind of went with the 3 people in the little boat because we experienced this rapid and crazy amount of trauma all together. And I think the mate is kind of struggling with forgiveness for his role in what ends up happening on the little boat. And so, but I mean, I feel like it still could change. That's the kind of wonderful thing about theater and like doing a show over and over again in many different iterations. Like, I don't know what it'll be next time.
Right.
Things are, just to add on quickly, I know sometimes maybe people don't understand the process of how these things work. Sometimes they're little tiny meticulous changes that you wouldn't recognize. You could see every preview and might not know that this note was different, or this person was standing 2 feet to the left, or this prop was here and then that person exited a different direction. So sometimes it's just about the puzzle piece, not only of what's going on stage, but what's going on backstage or underneath the stage. Like there's a whole choreographed thing that everyone knows exactly where they are at all times, and it's very detailed and specific. So it's not just we changed a song or we took out this dance. They're tiny little details that just make a final polished product.
I don't know if any of you all can speak to this, so if not, feel free to pass. But it's a big choice to have one of the actors on stage for 30 minutes as the audience comes in. And the question was sort of what informed that decision.
Michael, the director, didn't want there to be a moment where the lights go out and then you clearly see an actor walk out and lay in a bed and then the lights come up. That really was all there was to it, I think, unless I'm wrong.
Well, and also to establish sort of the world in which we were getting into, to then transition into another part of the same world, but just to give context of what you were going to be viewing as an audience member.
And our wonderful castmate, John Gallagher, bravely volunteered to do it.
Did he volunteer?
He was asked and he said, yes, I will do it. So I guess that counts. I mean, it means that he has to get there half an hour earlier from everybody. And it is definitely a challenge because he has to stay warm while lying completely still, to the point where some people are debating in the audience every night whether or not it's a real person.
Yeah, somebody actually apparently asked if it was a dummy that was lying there that then, like, as the lights came down, got replaced by a person, which made me think John has incredible breath control or something. Because, and, you know, for those of you who might be seeing the show again, listen for the fact that right before the show starts, because obviously there's no way that anybody can communicate to John like, hey, we're waiting 5 minutes because everybody's late because there was an accident on the bridge or anything. So he's just out there by himself with no information about anything and no real sense of passage of time other than what he can clock internally. So if you come back, listen for the fact that right before we start, there's a bird call that's louder than any other bird that you hear in the pre-show. And that's actually a cue to Johnny that it's about to happen. And until he hears that, he can sort of lay in his dream state.
Again, the tiny details, right? There's a bird call, it's a seagull, and that's the cue we're starting.
Exactly. Here's a fantastic question. This is an imagination one, fellas. If that incredible set were a character, and it is, says our questioner, what song would it sing as it revealed itself?
The Circle of Life from The Lion King.
I was going to go with Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
Oh, I was thinking just the intro of May It Last, that beautiful da-da-da-da-da-da, because I think that's so majestic and otherworldly.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Here's one. Stark, I guess this one's for you. Do you think Big Brother would have followed Little Brother to sea and done what he did if Big Brother had a wife and children of his own?
What a good question.
Right?
What we had decided, and so much of this was left up to us, some of these like backstory decisions, anything that wasn't on the script, we had to come up with a reason. I frequently mention Little Brother's girlfriend. Say, don't you love her? What about her? And I decided that it was because I had a sweetheart who passed on before we could be married. And because I'm a loyal person, that's one of my traits, have not been ready to move on from that. So that's the reason I'm single. It's the reason I'm older than him and I don't have a wife and kids at this stage in life. So to answer that question, I think if I did have a wife and kids, I would have to just question my loyalty to, which loyalty do I stick with? That's a good question. I mean, maybe because I had confidence that I would bring him back, I probably would still do it.
Right. Because there are things you don't know till they happen.
Maybe you just make it to the ocean and then be like,
He makes it to that first night on board and is seasick and he's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Calls an Uber.
Can I take that boat back to the...
I have to say, it makes me laugh every time I hear you say Melody Ann, because those of you who were involved in the very early stage development of this project will recall that the offstage girlfriend was originally named Sabella. And there are still moments where I'm convinced one or the other of you is about to say Sabella instead of Melody Ann.
There are moments I'm convinced I'm about to say Sabella.
See, I feel like I watched that happen on your face. Now you're going to do it tonight, and it will be all my fault. Everybody, if he says Sabella, it's on me. I'm so sorry.
I'm just waiting for him to say Sabelladian.
It can happen. You heard it here first, folks. This is a slightly strange question that's really just like my question for you, because we talked about it at some point just casually. This is a piece that seems to have huge religious and frankly very Christian themes. I am not a Christian. For those of you who either do or don't have a practice of faith, what was it like to go into those aspects of this piece? Does anybody want to get in that and swim around with me there?
Well, I can say I'm mainly agnostic. I've never really been an organized religion person. I do consider myself spiritual, and I feel like it's written in a general enough way to be able to read a sense of spirituality into it, even without having to ascribe a particular religion to it. I mean, these big questions of morality and what we'll do for each other, and whether you can be forgiven for your hand in trauma, essentially. Those are things that all of us have to deal with as humans. So, and also processing trauma. That's really how I read the mate's final scene, where he's grappling with what he did, as like kind of trying to address head on what he got away with, what he witnessed, and his hand in it. I can read it without having to be like, oh, it's about God and Christ and the Lord. We actually don't really talk about Jesus really at all in the show. But these are characters in 1800s America, and although there are many religions in America, these particular characters are Christian. So that's their way of talking about morality. To me, that's my personal understanding of it. I'm sure everybody can have a different understanding.
Yeah, I actually think, I mean, I'm Hindu, I was raised Hindu, and I think there's sort of a universality in the religious elements to the play. It's about, faith, action, intention, and I think, freedom in the afterlife, whatever that is. And I think that they all make choices to do that. And I think the play ends in a positive note that I think is hopefully good for everyone. If you believe in an afterlife, I think it sort of frees everyone. So I haven't really thought about it particularly in Christian terms, although I know that might be sort of there in the piece.
I grew up going to church, went to a Presbyterian church in Dallas, Texas. And I'm grateful for that, because that was, it allowed me to have a real point of view from this character's perspective. Once I got to college and was exposed to other people who subscribed to other beliefs, I widened my scope and sort of removed myself from a secular idea and more of a, I consider myself to be a spiritual person. And so I can still tap into the sort of themes that I need to for these moments. By the way, I think my mom is on here. Hi, Mom. Yeah, that's my I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had on my journey personally.
I know a lot of people have questions about whether there is going to be a future life for this show. Well, here are two things that a lot of people want to know. What's going to happen next? And is there going to be a cast recording? Who knows? I think this is the moment, just for all of you out there, this is a first production. And generally, you know, when you have the great privilege of doing a first production with artists of this caliber, of course you have hopes and dreams and intentions that it will have a future life, partly because it's really, really hard to make these pieces. And so if you're going to invest in the doing, you want them to be seen widely. So yes, of course, this is a moment that we're inviting people who work at theaters around the country, you know, people who are theater producers in New York and elsewhere to come see the show. And hopefully it will. And obviously, you will be among the first to know. And we do have our fingers crossed, and you know, with every hope and expectation that there will be more swept away to come. And you know, I feel the same way about a cast recording. I got really sad the other day about not hearing this particular group of people get to sing these songs every day. And this is again one of like the great benefits of this job is I can pop in for 10 minutes some nights and just like stand in the side and listen to these guys. So I very much hope there will be a cast recording. It's not going to happen during the next 2.5 weeks here in Berkeley. That's just, it's really hard to do those while you're doing 8 shows a week. And part of what we're really finding on this, and I don't know if any of you want to speak to this, is like what the physical toll as well as the emotional toll and the vocal toll of doing this show is. I mean, and, you know, there are some shows where you're doing tons of acrobatics and you find it, the challenges are perhaps more physical, but this one, is a really heavy lift vocally, I think, for everybody. So trying to record an album and do a 5-show weekend might not be the best result for everybody. Yes, I see your face, Stark.
Well, I want to say that for the people who are desperate for a cast recording, without getting specific, today we recorded some moments from the show in a recording studio setting, and that will at some point be revealed through a video format, things that don't exist anywhere else. So that was exciting to spend a couple hours today, you know, making a little video for people who want to see and hear more.
As a special treat, since these are people who actually turned up and gave an hour of their time to spend with us today, go ahead, tell them what it was.
Oh, so there's one song that doesn't exist in the Avett Brothers world at all outside of this musical, and it's a prayer that Big Brother sings, which leads into Ain't No Man, and then it becomes a mashup of those 2 songs. And so our producers thought that it would be a good idea to take the song that they can't listen to anywhere else, that leads into their biggest radio hit, and then this unique mashup of the 2. And so that's what we recorded today for all of those people who want to see it.
So we'll hopefully get to share that with you, hopefully next week. What else do people want to know? Sorry, I'm just scanning the chat here for a second.
I will say on that note, it was very funny to do it in a recording studio. Although we were doing it live, we weren't doing it with all of the storytelling elements exactly. No choreography, without the set, of course. So it was funny to just like isolate it as a song, because for me it's so tied to what's happening in the story.
Did you have to dance around a little bit just to kind of like place yourself there?
I did, yeah, I did.
Hey, speaking of the music, there are people who, because of where the band is positioned, actually don't know that there is a 6-piece live band performing these songs. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about just what it was to work with this band, how you went from kind of just piano in the rehearsal room to building out from there? What that collaboration is every night?
So in the rehearsal process, how we usually experience it is the band and or orchestra is separate from the cast, and we learn all of our things separately. So they rehearse different time, different place. And then we have what's called a sits probe, where we finally get to experience what the band has been rehearsing, which is the same thing that we were expecting them to do. And we get to mesh them all together musically. So everyone is singing while we participate in the band's like big rehearsal. And then we all get on stage, and it's a crazy thing because they can't see us, we can't see them. So we're all just relying on hearing and just trusting that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a very fantastic thing. And It's really fun when something does not go right on stage and you can see everyone's face perk up for a quick second and then disappears. If you're paying attention, you'll see it sometimes, but not all the time. But yeah, it's just an interesting process in terms of how the two are meshed together. But normally in a rehearsal process, we don't have the music, it's just the piano or sometimes a drum set. And in this case, they sort of gradually started to trickle in one by one until we got into the tech process, in which case we got to have everyone all together.
Well, this show, go ahead, Vishal.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting things about this show, and I think the challenges, was we wanted it to be as seamless as possible. I think traditional musical theater might have intro, song, and you button, and this wanted to flow more smoothly in and out of scene work, and I think that made for some interesting challenges. And that required, especially in the tech process and the preview process, there was a lot of finessing with the band because, like Torian said, it's not always, we can't always see them. So it was a lot of like, is there a little fill with the drums for 3 beats, or let's try 4 beats and see what that is? Is there a moment where we have to connect with them and we need to do certain gestures? Is there, like the end of Ain't No Man, we're all stomping together and the drums are with us, but we can't see the drums. So if we stomp a little early, it might get off. So it's building that and getting to that level of trust, that and also just knowing what it is in our bodies. That took a lot of finessing and time, especially on the part of our music supervisors who were sort of overseeing everything, Brian Yusufer and Chris Miller.
That was actually, speaking of previews, that was something that changed a lot during the previews. Was Yusufer and Miller were writing and changing parts of the music so that it would flow better, they were always really wonderful additions and changes in that. That's totally over my head, and it mystifies me every time when I see people doing that on the fly.
Yeah, it's that place where people who think about music that way, it's like people who are savants about math. It is that foreign to my brain and sort of as fascinating to watch happen. Jacob, were you going to say something?
Vishal, the exact same point.
He said it for you. But hey, Jacob, while I've got you.
Hi.
Hi. You, in your understudy capacity as the captain, went on for several days. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was to be thrown into that deep end? No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I mean, we had it was a wild experience because we had, we have understudy rehearsals, and we part of our job is to keep up with changes and things happening and do our best to keep up with blocking as long as we can see them. There are moments where, as the captain understudy, I'm asleep underneath the boat and he's on top doing his big song and scene and I can't see anything. So you really have to rely on, your associates, your stage management team, your friends, all of those things. But so we had a put in, which is where you typically, you get all of the technical aspects, you get mics, sometimes you get the band, sometimes you don't. And so we did that. Vishal was a part of that as well as the mate, and a couple of other fellows were with us. And that was such a great experience to get to do, because then you get to just kind of turn off your actor brain a little bit and just be like, oh yeah, like that's what things look like all around me as I'm supposed to be doing all of these things. And then to get to go on with these gentlemen here was such a joy to get to do, and felt so supported, and it was so wonderful. But to go back to the music point, hearing just the Avett Brothers music, while they're such incredible writers, it doesn't really matter. Hearing it on just the piano and then getting to go on stage for the first time as the understudy, the first time you hear the band, it just like takes you over and takes you, you know what I mean? Takes you into that place. You're like, oh yeah, that's what the Avett Brothers sound like. It's a really cool experience. So it kind of gives you all the energy and joy you need to get through the show.
Somebody asked a question about, for the songs that don't have a musical introduction, how do you get your note?
I guess I have to answer that one.
I think you do.
I do it twice. Sometimes you don't get your note. Sometimes you're off. So there's a song called "The Gift for Melody Ann," and there's like a 5-minute 5 minutes between the last time a song is sung and any music is played and when I sing that first note. And the key is that I have to listen for the last note of that last song, because that's my first note of the next song. And if there's only like 30 seconds between them, then those are easy. But that's one where if you listen closely, the song, the scene begins after the scene change, and you see us, or we are revealed in the little boat, the survivors. And we have been at sea for 6 days, and I'm kind of like breathing, but there's a note to my breath. So if you really listen, you'll hear me going, and that's me humming the note that I just heard at the end of the sort of shipwreck song. And I just, every once in a while, just hum that quietly to myself and sort of play it off as though I'm moaning or I'm like having struggling to breathe or something.
I always thought you were just singing a lullaby to me.
Well, and or that.
He is.
And the other one, yeah. So there are little tricks. I don't have perfect pitch. I wish I did, but I don't. So I have to use little tricks like that to find it.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was one time in trying to find pitches that there was like a bell tone that would just like one of the bells on the ships that would ring, and we would try to find the pitch from that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't notice it, you know, or I imagine it's similar to the call of the seagull at the beginning of the show. Like you just hear that and try to match that pitch. So there's all these little tricks of the trade that no one's ever privy to that are actually quite interesting.
There was, in the rehearsal room, I was somehow very good at getting the first note of my prayer song. And John Logan, our writer, was so determined for that first verse to be in the clear with no musical accompaniment, because it gives it a certain vibe. And I did pretty well in rehearsals, but then once we got on stage and we're doing it in the show, I was all over the place. And it's probably because I was in a different place, in a different, you know, in the middle of a real run. And so, yeah, we built in some little tricks. So there's a bell that sounds earlier in the scene, and that bell, they toned the bell so that it is a beat, which is my first note of the song. And it's not the easiest thing to grab from because it's not a pure tone. It has these tonics in it. A bell is not, it has lots of sounds in it, but like the main sound is the note that I'm looking for. So I do my best. And sometimes I'm a little bit flat, but you know, I get saved when they come back in.
Adrian, there are people who look at the relationship between little brother and the mate and wonder if there's any sort of romantic component to it or a mutual attraction. Is any of that resonant for you, or what does that feel like from the inside?
Yeah, it's actually something that I wondered and thought about early on, just mainly because little brother basically leaves his fiance, and you could read that as being like, well, something about this life doesn't feel right to me. Maybe I'm not the person that I think I am, or that I've been cast to be. But I think what we ended up settling on is that it's more about mate seeing a lot of himself in little brother, in the fact that he left home, and offering little brother a bit of a lifeline in this extremely new place that little brother has never been to, because he can kind of be like, well, I was once in that situation too. And that bond of like helping is kind of the thing that saves mate in the end, because he has this connection where he like has helped somebody before. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the great thing about a script that can be read in many different ways. Like it has an open-ended quality. Like you really could play it differently. It's just not the choice that we made. What are you gonna say, Torian?
Well, I just, you know, from the choreographer's perspective, as his dance captain, we were chatting, and that's the beautiful thing about subtlety, right? And interpretation is that you can interpret it how you want. Whether you're right or wrong or somewhere in between doesn't really matter. It's just how you accept it. But there was a moment where the choreographer wanted two of the sailors kind of slow dancing in the back of one of the slower songs, Swept Away, actually. And it almost felt romantic to suggest that, you know, when you're at sea for however long, things happen, and maybe that's just the reality of that situation. But it ended up in the final version being the dance between mate and little brother, and that's how that ended up being. And so whoever asked the question, the perception, there was something there, but what the specificity was is up to you to decide. Choose your own adventure.
And that's the beauty of theater, is each audience member is going to come to it with their own experiences, their own fantasies, their own wishes for themselves or for those characters. And each one of those experiences is right. There are questions about how you do the makeup in the little boat.
Well, first we have to shout out Megan Ellis, who is our makeup consultant out of LA. She works on all sorts of projects, film, TV, theater. I think she's coming back for another Berkeley show after this. And she had the behemoth task of not only designing makeup that would show natural wear and tear on the human body, the effects of dehydration and exposure to the sun, but also trying to teach us how to do that and to teach us to do it on stage, and also hide things in places that people wouldn't really be able to see us putting on our makeup. So we have makeup in the back, in the hold of the ship, that we're all using, and kind of in between. Vishal and Torian and Jacob can all attest. They go back and they're like hitting themselves with pouches of dust and putting sunburn spray on. And then for me, I also have some. Stark and I have two little hiding places in the skirt of the stage, where when we fall off the boat during the shipwreck scene, we're putting on makeup while the boat is going up, and it's only through theater magic that most people don't realize this. And then additionally, because I need to really look like I am on my deathbed for the last scene, last couple of scenes, I have some more pounces of makeup. It's hidden in like the little understory of the boat in the front. So when I go down, I'm putting on just the last touches and making my lips look white so that I have this deathly look. And then we also have that awesome blood knife, which I guess that's considered makeup, right?
Yeah, let's not give away too much, Adrian.
For the 5 people out there who haven't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Do each of you guys have specific pre-show rituals? And do they carry over from one show to the next, or do you have something special that you kind of design for yourself for each production?
We, the ensemble, have one that I'll speak to. These two gentlemen get to witness it every night. What is it Wayne calls us? The June Taylor dancers. We do, for each show, we do an 8 count of some sort of small warm-up-y kind of choreography. So we get together and we do an 8 count, a new 8 count each night, and it keeps getting added on to every single night. So we'll do like 1 8 count of like stretching our arms out, and then the next person gets to add something to that, and then we add something to that. That's one of our big pre-show rituals that we have a lot of fun with.
It is so impressive that you guys do that and add an 8 count, and it's not just one thing. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's like lots of stuff, and every night they add 8 more. And I think you've reset once so far. Is that right? It's a
How
lot.
long is it now?
We have enough of a concert to fill an entire stadium.
Yeah, it's about 13 and a half minutes now.
My pre-show ritual that remains, that it is carried from show to show to show, is there are little throat lozenges called Grethers pastilles that are soft, like black currant flavor.
So delicious.
They're amazing. And so I always have those. I have one before the show, and I try to have one like at intermission, and there's no intermission. So I sneak one in when Adrian is singing Swept Away with Johnny. There's a group of us that are all sharing from a little tin of Grethers back there.
Stark is actually paid by the Grethers lobby to mention Grethers every time they
Swept-Away, brought to you by Grethers.
Yeah, please, if you're out there
Only.
watching this talk back.
Adrian, do you have a pre-show thing?
I think Stark can will bear witness to the fact that I do some aerobics generally right before, just to stay light on my toes.
Like Jane
Often.
Fonda aerobics?
Yeah, like just jumping around and touching my toes and doing some dances. It's nothing choreographed, so definitely not as fancy as our mermaids. But yeah, I like to get my blood pumping.
It's a beautiful expression of exactly what you see when he runs on stage for the first time as Little Brother. Exactly that, but in his own, impromptu, like, awesome. It's great. I cherish it.
For me, I have to do some sort of like stretching or getting into my body before I put on my costume, because I am not used to high-waisted pants.
And yours are very high.
Very high, and they're restrictive. You can't do all the things. I mean, they kind of hold you up, like they're good for like a squat, but they're not good for touching your toes or stretching. So it's interesting to have to do that beforehand.
I've already busted a pair of pants because of my rambunctiousness. Also, to Lindsay Sporletter in the comments, I was just said cartwheel, please. I actually, at one iteration of the entrance, I was cartwheeling on stage. It was just a little too extra for it.
I'd like to take shared responsibility for having killed the cartwheel. Adrian, if I've never confessed this to you before, this is the moment. So sorry. I don't miss it at all.
I understand. We'll always remember it. We'll
have the memories. Okay, wait, what's a good last couple of questions? This is sort of broad, and sadly it only applies to, I guess, the one of you who lives through this experience, spoiler alert. But it's implied that the captain kind of had some PTSD after he came home. One of the last lines that's related to the captain is he was in a dipsomaniac ward. How do you think Little Brother dealt with the aftermath of this? Like, what happens? He seems to make this life. How do you think he integrates that sort of beautiful post journey life with whatever the internal residue of this experience would have been?
I've thought about this a lot, because you really do get this beautiful split section in John Logan's text to be like, this is how one person dealt with it, a really bad outcome, and this is how another person dealt with this traumatic event. I think Little Brother is really saved by having his older brother's sacrifice as a model, and is able to kind of walk in his older brother's steps, in Big Brother's steps, and kind of take on the tradition of Big Brother, go back to their hometown and live a loyal life, with family and with religion and spirituality and faith. I think he comes away from this, and that was my biggest takeaway from this script. And Little Brother has to find faith in this, the fact that he was able to survive, and it is traumatic, but at the same time it's a miracle that they live through. So that's how I think Little Brother makes it to the end. He lives a happy, full life after this shipwreck, but it's definitely not the outcome for everybody. So I think one thing that I think is fascinating about this whole show in general is that, like, this time was a really hard time to live through. I mean, this lifestyle, being out on a ship for years on end, like, it was not for the faint of heart, and it kind of required taking a lot of stuff and just like burying it deep inside of you. And that's really what The Mate is. That's the story of The Mate throughout this.
Okay, one lightning round before we part ways. What's one thing you each will take away from this experience? I broke them.
The ability to use your voice and not apologize for it.
I have no enemies.
One thing is deep, deep appreciation for my family who has allowed me to be away from them, my wife and my kids. I thought I appreciated them, and now it's only been amplified by this experience.
I'm taking California back with me. I hadn't spent a lot of time out here, and I think it's so beautiful. And I just want to, if I can hike every day as much as possible, I will. It's one of the benefits of doing a show out here.
Yes, Hilton National or Hilton Regional Park,
Hmm.
or Tilden. Oh my God, I've never done a show with a run this long, and so just being able to sit with material for a long time and see it change and grow. That's what I'm going to take away is just how beautiful that can be.
All right, everybody. Thank you, all you lovely people out there, for joining us and for being part of this show. It doesn't exist until we get to have these guys tell the story to you night after night. So thank you for being our partners in the act of making theater. And you, beautiful gentlemen, thank you so, so much for making time for this. Have a fantastic show tonight. All right, everybody. See you soon.